Welcome, everyone, to our June 27th, 2022 Natick Dam Advisory Committee. Really happy to see you all. I'm Ona Ferguson with the Consensus Building Institute here with Maggie Osthuth to facilitate and keep things going in a forwardly direction. We have, thanks for that. That's always such a pretty picture. We'll just go, I think, through the agenda briefly. Go to the next slide. Most of today, we're going to talk about the preliminary design of spillway removal that Stantec has completed, and they'll share their findings with us. And we'll take a break, and then we're going to talk about financial impacts and comparing the cost of dam repair versus spillway removal, as that's a piece of the puzzle also that we have been wanting to look at and haven't done in any detail until tonight. We have time for public comment at 6 o'clock, and the members of the public are in as attendees on this. So if you can't see it, we have 21 members of the public participating in addition to the 17 panelists who are committee members and staff managing this. Let me think, we're recording. We record all our meetings and post them so anyone can watch them and keep up with our process. We have the meeting agenda is posted on the project website. Maggie, can you put that link into the chat? Thank you, so people can see that and follow along if that's helpful. And I think that's it for some general logistics. Committee will go around, committee and Stantec folks who are sort of in the Brady Bunch kind of window squares here, and go around and do intros. If you just share your name and your role and your favorite dessert. We'll start there tonight. And I will call on folks just for ease of communication. Let's start with Dirk and then go to Mike Balcom.
Oh my. Dirk Coburn. I'm here as liaison from the Finance Committee. Was not there January 14th because I'm in a small business that has its busy season in the summer, and we were very busy. So I apologize for not being there, but I've reviewed the summary and feel up to speed. I'm sorry I was not there to speak of how attractive I find the idea of a bridge. And I hope we have a moment to discuss that a little bit later, because I know there are certainly issues of how is that feasible or not, but I think it's a great idea. I love to see that kind of creativity. My favorite dessert, right now, chocolate pot de creme.
Ooh. Okay, now I realize this is going to be a hungry kind of icebreaker. Here we go. I think we've done a little of that in the past too. Let's go to, thank you, Dirk. Mike and then Jillian.
Yes, my name is Mike Balcom. I'm a property owner downstream from the spillway and first year town meeting member. I guess I'll go with Oreo coffee ice cream. So there you go.
Fantastic, thank you. Jillian and then David, please. Jillian, can you unmute right now? There you are.
Hi, sorry, struggling to unmute. Also, it's very bright right now. I'm Jillian Wilson-Martin. I'm the Sustainability Director for the town of Natick, and my favorite dessert is anything chocolate.
Thank you. David Blees and then Janine.
Hi everybody, I'm David Blees. I'm an upstream abutter, member of the advisory committee. I did miss the last meeting. It was interesting to see the renditions. I don't know, I'm thinking about those somewhat. It looked like it's a much bigger park than it really is, but Anyway, yes, my favorite dessert, strawberry shortcake, I think.
Thank you. Janine and then Martin.
I'm Janine Furr. I represent the Historic District Commission, and I'm a downstreamer. My favorite dessert, hard to improve on vanilla ice cream.
And classic. Martin and then Gordon.
Martin Kessel, and several different roles here. I think I'm on this committee as a town meeting member in Precinct 10. I actually do also live on the river on Water Street and am on the Open Space Advisory Committee. And dessert, I think I have to get everything in one. So I'm going to have apple pie with chocolate ice cream a la mode.
Gordon and then Becca.
Hey folks, I'm Gordon Clark. I'm with Stantec and did the work for the site reconnaissance and preliminary design for dam removal. And favorite dessert, it changes. I think right now Tres Leches is up there.
Thank you. Becca and then Claire.
I'm Becca Stendhal. I'm a Natick resident and also represent sort of the environmental take on things. And I'd say all desserts are my favorite, but my current, I recently learned how to make creme brulee, and it's not that hard, but it's extremely fancy. So I'm going to go with that.
So fancy. Claire and then Terry.
Hey everyone, Claire Rendelli, Natick Conservation Agent, Open Space Planner. I think my favorite dessert, it's definitely a tough one, but cream puffs are definitely up there.
Terry and then Mike Tominski.
Terry Evans, I'm representing the planning board. I also serve on the Open Space Advisory Committee. And favorite dessert would have to be, I'm very specific, a dark chocolate tart with a crust made of crushed amaretto cookies and a bit of sea salt on the top. And if anybody wants, I can deliver one.
Wow.
Unbelievable. Mike Tominski and then David Lotting.
Hello, folks. I'm Mike Chelminsky. I'm a civil engineer with Stantec Consulting Services, project manager for the preliminary design study here. And my favorite dessert is a good cup of coffee.
Thank you. David Lotting and then Chris.
Hi, my name's David Lotting. I represent the Open Space Advisory Committee. And right now I would go at blueberry pie.
The seasonal theme is coming in. Chris and then Bill.
Hi, my name's Chris Stillman. I'm a member of the Natick Conservation Commission. And I think I was going to say creme brulee, and I still will. I mean, I still think I rarely get it. So it's probably not a genuine wish, but that's, yeah, I would say the egg custard or a creme brulee. Or those Portuguese ones that are the little pies that also have kind of an egg custard thing to it.
I like that theme. Bill and then John.
Bill McDowell, town engineer. I'm kind of with Chris. I haven't tried all the desserts in the world yet, so I don't know. And I don't want to sit here and go through the list of all the ones I like, but I'll just say for now, apple pie.
Thank you. John and then Maggie.
John Marshall, Deputy Town Administrator, and my favorite dessert is key lime pie.
Thank you. Maggie and then Kristen.
Maggie Ostius. I'm on the facilitation team with ONA, and I just had blueberry ice cream for the first time this season last night. So that.
You and Kristen.
Hi, everyone. Kristen, I'm a Nipmuc tribal citizen. And yeah, I'm just really hungry at this point. These all sound amazing. I just am really craving some chocolate right now, though. So anything that has chocolate or fudge, a good brownie would be would make me happy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I got all the committee members. Thank you all. For the members of the public who are interested in making public comment, we'd love to ask you to raise your virtual hand just for a moment so we can see how many there are so we can manage time well. So if you could click on raise hand just to give us a sense, and then we'll let you put them down. Yep, so members of the public who are interested in making public comment, if you raise your virtual hand right now just so we can get a count. And you can hit *9 if you're on the phone, if you're just calling in to raise your virtual hand. Right. Like 8-ish. Great. Thank you very much. You can take your hands down. We will be coming back to you closer to 6 o'clock. Thanks for that. Right, we have just one piece of business before we jump into the Stantec presentation, which is to approve the meeting summary from the June 14th meeting, so we can get that posted. Committee members, any comments or concerns about that? Thank you. We will get it up on the website. And I think then we're going to go right to the Stantec team to present findings, and we've asked them to design their presentation around some key questions that we know matter to the committee. So I think they're going to follow what the planners who thought were kind of logical flow for this committee, but there may also be questions that they can answer that they don't present on related to this work that we can ask in the discussion session. So Mike and Gordon, over to you.
Hey, great. Thanks, Anna. Let's share my screen here. And can folks see that?
Looks good.
Excellent. Well, yeah, again, thanks for having us. We're happy to be here and talking about the work that we did. Our presentation will present a summary of findings from our site reconnaissance and preliminary design for dam removal for the Charles River Dam. So just starting off here and just looking at what we'll be talking about in the next 15 minutes or so. So this slide just presents an overview of our agenda. And we'll give a quick kind of introduction on the study and the overview and the scope. Touch on just some of our background and also touch on the recon report that provides a summary of our findings. And then we'll dive into the summary of findings and spend most of our time on this section here. And we will review sort of our approach for how we went about coming to some of our conclusions. We'll get into talking about removal feasibility, discussing the idea of impoundment zones and what they are and why that's relevant, and then touch on some of the hydraulic and geomorphic changes anticipated from a spillway removal. And then finally, we'll sort of wrap up just touching on some of the additional recommended analyses to advance design and engineering and permitting for spillway removal project. So starting off here, just a quick overview of the study and scope. So Stantec was contracted to the Division of Ecological Restoration for this work. And our scope generally included reviewing existing information, readily available information, publicly available data sources. GZA's done a lot of work at the site too, so reviewing this information, getting an understanding of the site. And then we had a field-based component where we were out there making observations and data collection in the field, including sediment and bathymetric probing, sediment sampling analyses. And then we also had a sort of a preliminary hydraulic and hydrologic modeling element of our study too that we'll be talking about a little bit today. A big piece of it is identifying opportunities and constraints. Every project site's different, and there are opportunities and constraints associated with every dam or spillway removal site. So that's a big piece of what we do, and a goal of ours as we look at this information. And then kind of finally taking all that, synthesizing it, and developing a preliminary design approach and putting together a sort of a rough cost estimate for what that would entail. So we sort of have our eyes and ears tuned in specifically to this dam removal frequency. So the next couple slides. Yes.
Gordon, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Ona. I think, I realized I was supposed to go to Bill and let him give a little more context. I think we wanted to at least remind the committee and the members of the public that we had some preliminary design work for the dam repair option, and this work was really to get equivalent kind of preliminary work for dam removal. Bill, is there anything else you want to add before we go back to Gordon?
Thank you, Ona. I don't really think so. I did want to just stress the fact that we did have an actual project design that was created by GZ. Since that time, a lot of questions have been asked regarding the possibility of the spillway breach alternative, and a lot of those questions were answered by GZA and by staff based on the H&H, the hydraulic and hydrological model produced by GZA as part of their phase 1 and phase 2 inspection reports. The answers are also based on information known to GZA as part of their professional experience with other dam removal projects. In some cases, answers were also provided by Nick Wildman of DER based on his experience with other dam removal projects. But up until now, the spillway breach alternative has not been formally analyzed as a separate project. We were able to receive a grant from DER to perform this preliminary breach analysis, and the work commissioned is just noted by Gordon in that scope of work that was created for the DER. The analysis is administered and managed by them in order to provide a more definitive body of information on upstream river characteristics, the extent of the actual breach were that to occur, the constructability of the breach were that to occur, and then an opinion of probable cost for that. So as part of their analysis, they mentioned the additional work that they did, the sediment analysis, the bathymetric, the depth analysis, upstream and downstream. And I was just going to introduce the two members, Mike Chominski and Gordon Clark, and note that they attended our meeting on January 25th, 2022, in order to discern some of the committee's questions and concerns regarding the breach alternative. But their report format is typical to DER's requirements for similar dam removal projects throughout the state, and is, as noted, preliminary analysis. It's not a project construction design, but is the next step toward that. So it gave us a much more informed answer to a lot of the questions that have been asked so far. So a lot of the work is going to sound relatively familiar to the committee. Their analysis really picks up from the information previously discussed at earlier committee meetings and is informed by their additional field work and by GZA's H&H analysis. So at this time, I will just introduce Mike Chominski and Gordon Clark from Stantec, and thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Gordon.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Chominski, who will just touch briefly on some of Stantec's qualifications as it relates to our dam removal expertise in the region. So, Mike, take it away.
Thank you very much, Gordon. And Bill, thank you for the introduction, and Ona and folks for coming tonight to this presentation. So when we put this presentation together that's in front of you, it follows on our work. And one of the questions came up is, what are your qualifications? Well, I can say in some ways they're similar to GZA's qualifications when it comes to work in rivers, work on dams. We have a real specialty in dam removal. And just Bill noted that this work was, Stantec's work was done under contract to the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration. We've done more than 60 of these reconnaissance level or preliminary assessments for dam removal for Division of Ecological Restoration and their predecessor organization, the Riverways program, starting back from work we did in 2006. So we do a lot of these. And then you have reconnaissance level assessments for dam removal. What about completed dam removal? So we've done 12 completed dam removals in Massachusetts. And since when I first got one completed around 2008 or 9, Oxpasture Brook removal up in Rowley. And so no surprise, of those 12 completed dam removals in Massachusetts, 8 were under contract to Division of Ecological Restoration. They're a strong project partner. As many folks know, they advocate that. Relevance here, one of the terms of art we're using here is spillway removal versus dam removal. And dam removal is you remove the entire dam. Spillway removal is what folks have talked about in the Charles River Dam. And you think, what's the difference? Well, the picture is down at the bottom here, before and after, for removal of the spillway of Elm Street Dam in Kingston, which was removed in 2019. The picture that says before on the left is the dam impossibly close to the upstream bridge. And an important theme is historic attributes. Well, that funny metal truss in the foreground on the bridge was to the prior one-lane bridge that was there. And Progress came along and put in a concrete bridge with 2 lanes of traffic, really helped. But part of the accommodation to historic resources was refinishing that concrete or that steel truss and putting it up there. And in these pictures, you can go to the after and think, man, the site looks pretty much the same, except there isn't a spillway there. And you'll notice the spillway in the background, all of 10 feet downstream from the bridge. And in the foreground, in the before picture, a little stilling basin weir, which was a necessity because of classic changes. So those pictures show a relatively recent dam removal for which we were the engineer in Massachusetts. This was a challenging site. The land on the right was on the right side of the river. Left side of the image there was a public private events facility, weddings and whatnot. And the spillway was cast into the town water department building. So we've done some projects and completed them. Shoot over to the next slide, Gordon. So just so that clear it's not a one-off project, here's a few dam removals we've completed, just some notable ones. The 2010 Monsweig Dam, that was up in Woolwich in Wiscasset, Maine. It was a dam built for the Maine Yankee nuclear power plant. It was a tertiary water supply and a big dam, and it came down in 2010. We were the engineer of record on that. 2012 saw a lot of dam removals in Massachusetts. The picture in the upper right is the removal of Bartlett Rod Shop Company Dam. They made cane fly rods in Pelham, Massachusetts, and that was removed in 2012. We also had a dam removal on Thunder Brook in Cheshire that year, and 2 dams over on the Phillipston Reservoir Dam owned by the town of Athol in the town of Phillipston. So it was the primary dam and a secondary dam. Then the surprise there, Sackett Brook Dam, we actually removed that on land owned by Mass Audubon in 2013. A few other dam removals there. Carding Mill, that was out in Harwich, Mass in 2014. Pond Lily in 2015 was in New Haven, Connecticut. Timber Dam, 2016, that was back in Pelham, a dam that came out of the stream. 2017, 3 dams on Hammett Brook. Those are in Sturbridge on public land. A lot of fun. 2019, Elm Street Dam, I noted, and 2020, South Branch Gale River Dam in Bethlehem, New Hampshire. And those are all completed projects. So that's just by way of reference, a bit on our experience with dam removal. All set there. Thank you.
So I'll jump back in here. So as part of our work, and Bill touched on this briefly, but we prepared a report that we're in the process of finalizing. And this is our Stantec Recon report that we'll be referring to in this presentation. And this just contains documentation of the data review, the methods, and the findings for our dam removal assessment for DER. And we provided a draft to the town for their review and comment. And then we're, as I mentioned, in the process of preparation of the final report, which should be completed by the end of this month and will be provided to the town. So now we'll move on and start touching on a summary of our findings. And I'll start off with this slide, which presents an overview of our approach in assessing and developing a preliminary design and assessment for removal of Charles River Dam. And major elements include reviewing available information, identifying potential constraints as well as opportunities. And then the preliminary design piece included employing the use of hydraulic and hydrologic modeling, looking at dam removal geometries, and looking at construction sequencing and evaluating potential approaches for that. And then looking at costs associated with design, permitting, and construction. And then finally, identifying any data gaps that we might have discovered going through this process and providing recommendations for additional data collection needs. And I just wanted to note that these steps and these major elements are documented in the body of that 2022 Stantec study report. So starting off, looking at the question of feasibility. And so the question really kind of simply put is spillway removal feasible? So, they're acknowledging there are sort of multiple aspects of what may be defined as feasible or not, such as social and financial aspects, technical, regulatory perspectives, for example. So from our findings, we can say that yes, spillway removal appears to be feasible from the technical and regulatory perspective. Specifically, some of the things that we're looking at: hydraulic design requirements, ODS, which is Office of Dam Safety, Mass DEP, FEMA, have certain sort of hydraulic design requirements. And these appear to be able to be satisfied for removal of the spillway. And this figure in the bottom here that is all kind of looks like it's on graph paper and kind of engineering. We've got elevation on the left, the y-axis, and the bottom is stationing. So we've got slightly different scales. So just knowing that if things kind of look squished, just take note of the different scales on both these axes. And this figure really just represents what an approximate opening geometry through the spillway could look like. And other features would include the left spillway abutment. So that's referencing facing downstream, left and right. We're typically referring to an observer facing downstream. So that left spillway abutment would remain kind of supporting those old historical gristmill grinding stones. And then similarly on the right side, I think there was also an opportunity identified to preserve the right spillway abutment and the existing low-level outlet structure, which could be used as an observation platform, for example, and a similar sort of opportunity there. And then the right embankment would remain. So our dam removal would just be the spillway removal. So the right embankment and trees would get to remain as part of that. So technically, hydraulic design requirements appear to be satisfied. And another note here is from the technical side. Usually sediments in an issue upstream of dams. So we did some sampling and analysis similar to GZA, and our results suggest that contamination of the sediment upstream does not appear to be a significant constraint in dam removal. So moving on from feasibility, we'd like to just touch on this idea of different impoundment zones. And so this slide presents an overview of what we're coining as impoundment zones in terms of our language of art, our art of language here, I should say. So we've got this idea of impoundment zones. So what are they and why do they matter? Well, really what we're referring to here is, and how we've broken up this upstream reach, is this northern impoundment zone. So that's the area between the dam and the private pedestrian bridge located upstream. So we're calling that this northern impoundment section. And then there's upstream of that is the southern impoundment section. And flow, just to note, is from left to right here, just to orient you, and north is facing this way on our screen. So it's really just the segmentation of the upstream reach into two different sections. So why are we doing that? Well, the idea is it's sort of based on the degree of anticipated changes following spillway removal. So specifically, these two different sections, so the northern and southern impoundment sections, would see more and less changes hydraulically and geomorphically. The northern impoundment section, the one closest to the spillway, between the spillway and the private pedestrian bridge, would see sort of the more significant changes would be observed there. Whereas sort of upstream of that, we would still have some changes, but they'd be much less significant. So now that we've kind of set the stage here, we can start to talk about the topic of sort of these hydraulic and geomorphic changes that we can expect. And right off the bat, I think we all know that spillway removal will result in changes. So some questions of interest that were identified are, what would happen to the depth of water upstream? What would that change look like? What would flow speeds look like? Again, sort of taking the spillway out similar to depth. What can we anticipate? What would happen to the width of the river? And another question came up, is would the area be navigable for kayaks and canoes? So we'll start off with this first question of interest here. What would happen to the depth of water if we take out the spillway? So in this slide, we've got this figure, again, on this sort of graph-like paper here that has elevation on the left, the y-axis going vertically here. And then on the x-axis is the stationing. So that's the distance along the alignment of the river. And things might look kind of jagged and weird and kind of a bit odd, but again, just noting that the scales are different here. There's a lot more feet on the bottom than there are going vertically here. So for folks who might not be familiar with or look at these every single day, it looks a little weird, though. That's the reason why. But this figure allows us to take a look at what are some anticipated changes that we have between existing conditions and sort of our what we're calling proposed spillway removal conditions. And we've modeled a few different flows here, including sort of our typical median annual flow that we would expect. So typical normal flows in the river. And then we have some high flows, including the 2-year, what was referred to as the 2-year return storm, the 50-year, and then the 100-year return interval storm. So these are high flow events. So a couple pieces that also help orient us. I remember mentioning the northern impoundment section and the southern impoundment section. I've boxed them out here in this figure to just give folks a reference. And I also want to point out that in this case, flow is going from right to left on the screen. So it's opposite from the plan views we were looking at before. And a couple things we can note from these existing and proposed hydraulic modeling simulations here. And I can walk through them, but another piece of orientation, these solid lines are the proposed and the dashed lines are, I'm sorry, solid lines are the existing and the dashed lines are the proposed. So in the northern impoundment section, you remember I mentioned that we would see more significant changes happening to our, basically the change between existing and proposed. So we see a much more pronounced change in the, especially for the normal lower flows, the water depths and the elevations when the dam's taken out in the northern impoundment section versus in the southern impoundment section. For normal flows, you have maybe about a foot change of water upstream in that southern impoundment section, upstream of the pedestrian bridge, whereas downstream, it's a 3 to 6 foot change. So for normal flows, we're going to see these sorts of changes. And then also something to point out is for the changes diminish as you increase flows. So for example, for the 100-year storm, we're seeing a smaller change between existing and proposed versus our lower normal flows. And then also we can take a look at what sort of changes are going to be happening downstream in terms of the water surface elevations from existing to a proposed spillway removal condition. And in this case, because they're both overlaid on top of each other, there is no change that we're expecting downstream as a result of dam removal. Now, this figure here is a graphic that we developed, and these present the results from sort of a conceptual 2-dimensional hydrodynamic model that we put together for the purposes of this presentation that show the depth of water within the northern impoundment section, looking at the median annual discharge, so it's sort of the typical normal flows. So in general, we see a slight reduction in the water depth in the area between the dam, which is about here, and we've got the MWRA sewer crossing upstream. So there's a bit of a change there. So we've got, in this green area, water depths anticipated for just normal lower flows on average between 0.5 foot to 1 foot deep, where the water depths are approximately 1 to 1.5 feet deep upstream and downstream. And obviously this changes depending on the flows we have in the river, but this is just a quick look at our sort of the median annual discharge, a typical flow. Again, noting, as we're not anticipating any changes downstream. So in our downstream reach, we've got about a 1 to 1.5 foot depth, and that's going to be similar to what we see upstream as well. So just a quick summary on this topic of what would happen to the depth of water. So the most significant changes would be in the northern impoundment section. We're going to see a reduction in water depth under normal flow conditions. So about 3 to 5 feet reduction in the northern impoundment section, and about a 1 foot reduction in the southern impoundment section, and no changes downstream. It's gonna stay the same. So moving on to our next question of interest here, what would flow speeds look like? So here's another graphic that we put together that we're hoping would be helpful at depicting what flow speeds would look like when the spillway is removed. So again, this slide is a graphic depicting the results from that sort of conceptual 2D hydrodynamic model that we developed for the northern impoundment section. And again, this is the median annual discharge, so a typical flow in the river. So in general, we'll see a slight increase in flow speed in that area between the MWRA sewer and in sort of just at the dam. And flow speeds are around 1 to 2 feet per second, approximately, both kind of upstream and downstream of the dam, with that slight quickening of about 2 to 3 feet per second upstream of the spillway and kind of in between the spillway and the MWRA crossing. And so again, we're not anticipating any changes downstream. So to summarize some of the findings from this question of flow speeds and what would they look like. So again, sort of the most significant changes are going to be in the northern impoundment section. And we're going to see a slight increase in flow speeds under normal flow conditions in general. So in the northern impoundment section, flows are going to be around 1 to 3 feet per second, which is pretty typical of the Charles River, very similar to ambient conditions downstream. But the change in this northern impoundment section specifically is relative to basically no flow speeds as you're moving from a pond. to river conditions. So they're going to be very similar to what's downstream. And there'll be perhaps a small increase in flow speeds in the southern impoundment section. So not quite as, again, not as significant as the northern impoundment section. And then 3, just noting that, you know, there won't be any changes down in that downstream reach. So moving on to the next question, what would happen to the width of the river? So this slide presents what is referred to as a digital elevation model. And we've also got some contours overlaid here. And the way this is collected is with laser beams being sent out from airplanes. So it's collected, and it provides an opportunity to get kind of a high resolution look at the ground surface. And it's very useful. And in this case, we can see the approximate existing upstream width of the impoundment that I've noted with these arrows here, because the lasers don't penetrate the water surface elevation. So it provides sort of this opportunity to see where your water is flowing. And what we did was take a look at sort of the approximate normal water surface elevation and where the boundaries are in this northern impoundment section, as represented by the what's called the LiDAR data. So this is the laser detection digital elevation model. So I've highlighted here in red this approximate normal water surface elevation and kind of the boundaries. And so we can see the width from the existing extents. What we then did was modified this digital elevation model and put in the anticipated width of the river following spillway removal. So we put a channel in starting downstream, taking out the dam along what we anticipate is the approximate alignment. And you can get a sense of between these red lines and where we see this channel that we put in, the sort of changes that we'd expect in terms of where there's open water now and these areas which would be converted to bordering vegetated wetlands, emergent habitat. And again, this is just looking at the northern impoundment section, because these are where the changes were going to be sort of the most significant, as we've previously noted. So highlighting some things here, no anticipated changes downstream. Downstream is still going to be a river. These wider areas in the northern impoundment section will be reduced, so the width will be decreased in our northern impoundment section. And then we'll see smaller changes, but they won't be as noticeable in the southern impoundment reach. So on this slide, I presented a summary of sort of the major points here from what would happen to the width of the river. So again, most significant changes are going to be in the northern impoundment section. Overall, there'll be a reduction in the channel width under normal flow conditions, about an average. We're thinking about 20 to 25% width reduction in the northern impoundment section, and maybe on average about a 5% reduction in the width in the southern impoundment section, and no changes that we're noting downstream. And again, as I noted on the previous slide, some of those areas where we had existing open water habitat would be converted to bordering vegetated wetland areas. And our last question here that came up was sort of, would this area be able to be navigated by people paddling kayaks and canoes? So navigability depends on a number of factors. You have different hydraulic characteristics, such as depth and flow speed. Different types of vessels are going to have, for example, different drafts, different amount of water they're displacing. Some can go in very shallow. Some need a little bit more water before they bottom out. The amount of gear, amount of weight you're carrying, paddling approach, whether you're taking a leisurely stroll or you're going on an adventure, you're very determined. So all these sort of things play into, is it going to be able to be paddled through? And so there's a little bit of, it's not super cut and dry. We can talk about what we're anticipating in terms of some of the depths and flow speeds within that northern impoundment section, and give folks a sense as what things are going to look like. And I think for sort of a comparison purposes, paddling conditions are anticipated to be similar to the conditions flowing through the existing downstream Pleasant Street Bridge in the reach downstream of the dam. And there will be changes, again, noting that we're going from a pond, this impoundment, to the natural river. And so those changes will happen. There's also some uncertainty related to the potential for historic rapids at or near the spillway. We found some references in some of the data, the historical maps that we reviewed in particular seem to suggest there's a potential for the dam was built on the site of an area with a historic rapids. Typically dams are built in these areas, so that wouldn't be too surprising. And it's just things that we don't know. We don't have any data right now to make any strong conclusions related to that. And then finally, also pointing out, in the upstream reach, there's likely going to be a reduction or elimination in the ability for larger powered vessels, motor craft, to be able to navigate in the southern impoundment section. And our last section here is just touching on some of the additional analyses that we would recommend if spillway removal were to be advanced to help out with the design and permitting. And we've listed 4 here. The first one being some additional bathymetric survey to support hydraulic analyses that are, kind of move beyond just the conceptual preliminary level. And the idea here is, with additional data, we'd be able to develop a better understanding of what the post-removal dam extents in the upstream reach, specifically in the southern impoundment section, would be, and then also kind of understand and develop a better understanding of conditions at the upstream pedestrian bridge in terms of, the potential need for scour countermeasures, as we might see an increase of, slight increase in flow speeds there. So the bathymetric survey would support these additional hydraulic analyses, which are listed here in number 2. And as I noted, there may be the potential to have an increased susceptibility to scour for upstream infrastructure, including the private pedestrian bridge and the Farm Road Bridge further upstream, as well as the MWRA sewer crossing, which is about 800 to 900 feet upstream of the dam. And also take a look and get a better understanding of the sediment transport and downstream, what we call the assimilative capacity, the ability for the downstream reach to handle sediment that could be sent downstream as a result of dam removal, and get a better sense of approaches for sediment management as part of dam removal. And the last 2 here, number 3, the historic resources investigation is something that for a site that has a long history of settlement, and also different groups have lived in this area. This is something that would seem to be important for this particular site. So that's also something we are recommending. And then finally, kind of similarly, given the value of the trees that we have on the dam embankment now, consultation with a tree specialist, such as an arborist, to just make a determination about whether post-dam removal conditions, such as the reduced water table that might be expected across that dam embankment, would have a role in, or the trees would be stressed by that sort of change. And we're not anticipating that would necessarily be a problem. white pines are pretty hardy, and most of the trees out there are white pines. But just due to the value to the community, that's also something we would be recommending. And just to wrap up, some 5 big takeaways here from some of our findings. So spillway removal appears to be feasible, at least from the technical and regulatory perspectives. Spillway removal would result in changes. And you can think about it, in particular as this transition from a pond to a river with the bordering vegetated wetlands. Most of these changes, number 3 here, most of the significant changes would be observed in the northern impoundment section, less so in the southern impoundment section. Number 4 here, elements of navigability would change. Again, this idea of going from a pond to a river, and also acknowledging that there's some uncertainty about the presence of some natural rapids at the spillway location. And 5, there would be some additional data collection analyses recommended to reduce some of this uncertainty and support the engineering design and permitting if the town chooses the spillway removal alternative. So with that, that's kind of what we had prepared here, and I'll turn it back over to Ona. Thank you.
I think maybe take down the slides for a moment, and let's just let committee members, if you can raise your hand, if you have questions, comments, reflections. We have about 20 minutes or so to make sure we really understand what's in front of us. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a few questions about your means and methods. Did you do any sediment analysis, specifically impacted sediment near the dam itself? Just trying to figure out if there was an accumulation of large berms of sediment.
So in terms of, I think your question is referring to like the characterization of the sediment, and yes, we did. We went out and we did a bunch of probing within the. We really focused on the northern impoundment section. Kind of did a bunch of transects. I got a bunch of data points, and there was, typical of these dams is lower energy comes through. You have settling of material, so we've got sort of a blend of finer material and then also sand as well.
So
yes, we did.
So in that process, I mean, I assumed due to the environment, you're going to have a lot of fines. Do you not see an increased velocity causing a moderate or long-term impact to the downriver area? Because now you're actually moving sediment from one point to another rather than truncating it at the dam. I mean, I think it would be negligible if I was to use my own opinion, but it'd be interesting to hear your opinion.
Sure. Yeah, and I can let I can speak to this, and Mike, feel free to jump in too. But dams, what they do is they, as folks know, they limit the transport of sediment downstream, and so they provide a sink for all that finer material that settles out. Where normally in a natural system, it's being transported down. And so what we've seen over the past years with the dam in place is slowly sediment builds up, and this is typical of spillways. Over time, you see this building up of fine material. And there is a fair amount of sediment upstream, and that kind of goes into the sediment management approach and sort of what sort of approach, either what's called an active sediment management approach or a more passive one, or a blend of both as part of a spillway removal. So for example, repositioning sediment upstream of the dam spillway during the removal of the spillway to kind of start a starter channel and limit some of the immediate transport of that pulse of sediment that goes downstream might be seen as something advantageous to the site. And then touching on sort of the temporal component piece, over time, sediment, just like in a normal river, will as a storm comes through, an episodic rain event comes through, you're going to see this transport of material downstream, just as it was hundreds of years ago, and is, in the upstream reaches. So we'll connect that sort of sediment discontinuity, and over time, the downstream reach we'll see sediment transported downstream as it makes its way to the next downstream.
Great. Thank you, God. Thank you, Gord.
Sure.
Thanks. Let's get Martin and then Becca in.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking at the depths, which has always been a big concern of mine, and it's good to have some solid information, or at least very likely information on what's going to happen. What is the depth that you would say makes a river unnavigable? What does a canoe or a kayak need to get through? I mean, I can guess, but maybe you know professionally.
Yeah, Mike's got a lot. So I've got a canoe. So the draft on a canoe, it depends. You've got one person in it, two people in it, how wide it is. There's a lot of different factors at play, but and then there's also the paddling too. So you might be able to float, but then there's the paddling piece too. So you could float maybe on 4 inches, 6 inches, but then that paddling. Obviously, more water is helpful for that. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, going downstream with the current, half foot will be fine in most canoes or kayaks. You'll drift along. If you want to go upstream, the canoe doesn't draft much more water, but you get your paddle in, whether you're on a canoe or a kayak, and you want 1.5 feet, 2 feet to really get a bite. If you just have a sunfish tail in the water a few inches deep, just the tip of the paddle, you're not going anywhere, especially if the water's moving.
So the diagram you showed, I believe, said that the large area just upstream of the current spillway would be 0.5 foot to 1 foot. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, between the spillway and the sewer crossing under that particular flow condition. So it's going to change a little bit there too.
Well, yes. I'm concerned with it. It's not going to be the same all. It's going to go. Some will be more on the 1 foot. Some would be 0.5 foot. And maybe could there even be sections that are under 0.5 foot, which would basically block people. And
under 0.5 foot.
Where it's where it's 2 inches and you're pretty much you're blocked.
Yeah, under 0.5 foot potentially, and then over 1 foot as well. So there will be variation. Yes, I think that's a fair possibility. When I'm out in a river and I'm paddling and I have a section of a riffle like that, I'll just step out, bring a canoe up a little bit further, 20, 25, 40 feet, whatever it is, and then get back in and be on my way. But
I'm sort of projecting, and I kind of was thinking about this, anticipating this might be the case even months ago, that it might look something like downstream of the Pleasant Street Bridge. You didn't give any indication that downstream of the Pleasant Street Bridge was problematic, but it's, for those of us who live here, there's a good part of the year when I think it really breaks that 6 inch barrier. It's kind of less than 6 inches and just impossible to get through. And I assume that would stay the case. We're not going to improve the section. It's always been a problem. But I'm kind of. It sounds to me like the section upstream of the bridge would now have that same characteristic of being on the borderline. And what that means is some of the year it's going to be more and some less. And I understand that we do a lot of our canoeing in the spring when it's high and we get by, but there's going to be some uncertainty basically. So I guess that is my takeaway from everything I've heard at this point.
Thank you, Martin. It's really helpful to have you sharing kind of your thought process, I think, with the committee, because we know that's an important subject for you.
Thank you.
Becca, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump on that and then go to what my actual question was. But, I was thinking about that seasonality of the river. And, for me, I know in August, I just put in other locations. I stay away from that Pleasant Street area because downstream I've gotten stuck, and I've gotten stuck also on some of the rocks in August. And September when it is low. So I think there is that seasonality as it exists now. And I just go to different places in that time, and I realize that changes the dynamic for folks that live there, but it's just, again, it's a river and there's seasonality. One other thing I was going to ask, given the future studies that are recommended, we've had conversations in previous meetings about there's no end to what data we could collect in different scenarios and what we might want to do and explore. And I guess the question is, I realize every project you've worked on is different and there's different components, but how in past projects, how thoroughly have you explored some of those outstanding questions? Like, before a decision is made, are some of those studies really necessary before a decision or a recommendation could be made? Or is it just a situation where more data is always great, but not always necessary? So if you could kind of elaborate on that, I think that would be helpful, if that question's clear.
Yeah, no, I think so. There's always more data collection. There's always more studies that could be done. One of the things that comes to bear for different projects, or what are the goals and objectives that we're looking at. For example, if the slight changes in the upstream width of the river in the southern impoundment section, for example, is something that is identified by a stakeholder or a dam owner as we really need to reduce some of the uncertainty here, then that would be something that one might like to consider. Different things have different weights in terms of, is this valuable? Is this something valuable, not valuable? In terms of advancing, there's kind of two things. There's kind of there's the decision of, based on the information that we know, can we make a decision? And then there's the information that would just is sort of inherent and be part of an engineering and design advancement. So if dam removal is something that looks like will meet the goals and objectives for the owner or the stakeholder, then we're going to recommend more hydraulic modeling to take a closer look at, for example, scour. That's something that it was beyond the scope of us to look at that as part of this study. But when you have upstream infrastructure, that's something that you just want to do your due diligence in advance as part of a project. So I think there's kind of two pieces there. There's what sort of information does an owner or stakeholder need in order to make a decision, and then what's the tolerance for some of those pieces of uncertainty, and then sort of the final piece being, all right, well, what's part of the design process? Yeah, more data collection in these specific areas is something that we need to do. So that's kind of how I would categorize that, if that helps answer your question.
Thank you. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Gordon and Michael, for this. It's great information for us. I guess following up with what Becca was saying, as a committee, we're trying to make a decision, and you've suggested some additional data points, and without asking for every data point possible, I wanted to get your opinion, your and Michael's opinion, on if you were to do this project, would you suggest we do additional analysis for scouring, and in particular, kind of the assimilation capacity downstream of sediment? So that's the one question. And the other one was, I know we've taken samples of sediment above the spillway, another company has. And I was wondering if you looked at that report and had an opinion to, any possible toxicity or something we should worry about as a town. Thanks.
Sure, Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll field that. Mike, those are good questions, and they kind of go back to the previous question by Becca, which is you can study any project to death. In this case, I think the big drivers are really public perception and boating. So the spillway looks like a waterfall. With regard to sediment, we did in our findings suggest that, yeah, this is a highly scrutinized project. Folks have already noted, wow, you can't even kayak downstream of the bridge in summer when the water's low. We evaluated about 20,000 cubic yards of sediment would be readily mobile in the near term. So you might want to put a finer point on that. And it's not a big study. The Elm Street Dam removal example that we showed you, it was about one-tenth the amount of sediment, but a much smaller river. And so we actually did a bit of due diligence. In that case, it was because of fisheries resources. So I think given some of the concerns, you might look at further analysis of sediment, but that's really specific to the project and the stakeholders and what people are concerned about. With regard to the sediment analyses, so we've already discussed that there's a lot of fine material in there. We did some sediment probing as part of this. And for folks who are downstream, when you get a really high flow, like folks who were around in the spring of 2010, was the water really brown downstream of the dam when it was flooding? Yeah. So at really high flows, this impoundment's not capturing this fine sediment. All it's not capturing, it's not getting really larger sand, gravel, and cobble further upstream. So at lower flows, leaves, fine sediment accumulate. The results of the prior analyses by GZA sediment sampling and the results from 2 sediment samples we collected upstream of the dam and had analyzed, and 1 sample that we collected downstream of the dam and had analyzed. And for those of you who boat out there, we got the downstream sample at the old railroad bridge abutments downstream. So we tucked in there, but there's not a lot of fine sediment there. The river's steeper and a lot of the sediment goes through. The results of the lab analyses that we got were similar to those that GZA got, and they had similar exceedances of some of the contaminants. From the standpoint of what you find in sediment in dam impoundments and in rivers, such as the downstream sample in Massachusetts, there are exceedances of criteria. There are also concentrations that typically would be negotiated or discussed with the state and federal regulatory agencies, and typically for dam removal would not raise red flags. We did not see what you might call scary results in those. They're typical, and recognize there are a lot of roads out there. A lot of the material in there may be road sand that's washed in. You have cars along these roads, which, you get oil dripping out of cars, tire residue, and atmospheric deposition. So based on what we've seen in this preliminary study, we did not see any showstoppers in the sediment analysis data or in the previous data collected by GZA.
Thank you. That's great. Committee members who haven't had a chance to share your thoughts or ask questions, what are you hearing? What do you take away? Anything else you would like to understand or ask?
It's Dave.
Janine. Let's go to Janine and then David, please. Janine, you're on mute. Try one more time. You were there for a sec.
Can you hear me now?
Go. Yep.
Are you there? Okay,
good,
I didn't hear any reasons that there's danger in taking the spillway out. Or it feels sort of like science supports the idea that this is feasible and not dangerous to the abutters or residents or kayakers, etc. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you. David, please.
Yeah, I guess I was a little taken aback with the navigability. I just wondered if our experts can give us an idea of typically, and I know it's probably not a fair question, but typically how how much of the spring, summer, fall will the area be open to, canoeing, where it's going to be a foot or more water? I mean, we put a lot of onus on launchways and what have you in the renditions, and now it looks like they might even be useless.
I'll field that if that's okay. So right now, David, it's a pond upstream from the dam, particularly in what Gordon described as the North Impoundment area, which we brought down. You've got sort of a pond section there in the North Impoundment section, which we loosely characterize up to the pedestrian bridge. And we know folks can put in there or put in at the dam, and you go back and forth unless the river is in flood stage, in which case sensible people aren't out there. Upstream from that, the river has a bit of current. So for an energetic paddler, they might be enthused with going upstream. If you take the dam out, it's reasonable to say that under all conditions, it is now a river. So now if you're standing on the Pleasant Street Bridge and looking upstream, you don't see people paddling in the river below you, but you see them on the impoundment. It's with the spillway gone, it's going to be a river again. So it will not be that flat water impoundment. So paddling downstream for enthusiastic river people, that's going to be easy, particularly at higher flows. Now, as, I'm looking for the name here, who mentioned it was in summer. Oh, it was Becca. Becca mentioned in summer below, downstream from the bridge, it can get shallow. It's reasonable to expect that at lower flows, the river may be too shallow in some of those areas, particularly where the river seems to be steeper between the pedestrian bridge and the location of the spillway or the pedestrian bridge. So going downstream, you could probably do that, but recognize a lot of that also has to do with how the channel forms after dam removal. If one deliberately has a narrow channel, you have a narrow channel, the water is going to be deeper, it's more paddleable, but you still get into the question if it's 3 feet deep, but moving more than 3 feet per second, which is about the upper end for paddling upstream or just holding in the current, you're not going to be able to go touring upriver. So that's a fundamental difference, is the pond-like part, the North Impoundment area, would not be there without the dam. Does that answer the question, David, reasonably, or any fine points there?
No, that answers the question. Yeah, thanks a lot. I guess I had hoped to hear somebody say, well, you'll be able to paddle upstream from the impoundment area for about the same period of the year as we can do now, but it might be a little more vigorous paddling at some points. But that doesn't sound like it's the case.
Martin, and then other committee members, sort of last chance to get into this discussion before we go to break in a couple minutes. Martin, go ahead.
I'm not muted. Okay. One more follow-up. We had someplace we had talked a while ago about the possibility of channeling the river to make it deeper, basically narrowing it. And along with that, I don't know where I heard this. I must have been at this committee. I don't know where else I'd hear it, but I heard somewhere that the river actually was artificially widened by the spillway. And before that, it wasn't that wide. And by widening it, it also made it a lot shallower. So it might be, might make sense to narrow it back again to whatever the natural flow of the river was before the spillway was there, which would give it a little bit more depth and it would also give it, I guess, more speed, which we'd have to deal with. But I think those can be weighed. But to kind of think of the spillway as natural and we should keep it that wide doesn't make sense, really. If we're talking about going back pre-spillway, pre-dam, we have to sort of think of what the river was originally.
Thanks, Martin. We'll go to Terry and then Dirk, and then we will take a break.
Thank you. I was reacting to the comment about natural rapids and the question about whether in its post-spillway removal configuration, whether that there would be a presence of natural rapids. I know that early in the conversation, we talked about how people like to hear the sound of running water, those people who weren't planning to kind of paddle or move through it. And there was a discussion even of trying to create or retain some feature at that point of the river that would kind of bring the waterfall of sound and kind of keep that sort of the burbling sound of running water, almost to make a deliberate step. And I just wondered whether that remains a possibility or whether it becomes an either or proposition with navigability.
Gordon, do you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, the soundscape question. I think no matter what goes in there, it's in terms of the volume from 8 feet of water or 6 feet of water, cascading over a spillway versus rapids. That it's going to be much less. So I think, yeah, there is an opportunity, and whether it's from maybe a historical type rapids, whether there's bedrock there, there may be an opportunity there, or a man-made sort of natural riffle that would be installed there. And riffles typically are going to have that shallower type of flow. So I think the answer is yes, there may be an opportunity to provide some, a riffle there, whether it's natural or man-made, if that's something that's important. But you may be compromising a depth of water at a particular location, and recognizing that it wouldn't be as loud as the existing spillway.
Dirk, go ahead.
Thank you. Few observations I would make from decades of being a paddler myself. First in kayaks, actually, and longer in kayaks than in canoes. My experience over that time is that they have somewhat different characteristics. We've been kind of lumping them together, but it seems to me that that if we look at a viable season or an expected viable season, it would differ depending on whether we're talking about kayaks or canoes. A kayak drafts in typically about 3 to 5 inches of water, and a canoe in more like 4 to 8 inches of water. But the biggest difference is the depth you need for purchase in a paddle, and it's much more lateral with a kayak paddle, and you can do pretty well in something shy of a foot of water in a kayak, and you need a good foot and a half at least for a canoe. Given that, my question is, well, my question goes back to one that was asked, and I probably can't be answered on its terms, which is the expected season for each type of craft.
It sounded like it couldn't be asked specifically, but Michael Szymanski, go ahead if you want to jump in.
Yeah, this just goes to the natural variability of rivers, and we generalize these by season: summer, spring, fall. Anybody who does the Allagash in Maine, who's an enthusiastic paddler, knows you go up there in the late spring when there's plenty of water in the Allagash, even for going downriver. So in the case like the Charles, you've got canoes, kayaks. In the last 10, 15 years, the advent of really recreational kayaks as opposed to solid whitewater closed boats. And Dirk, I absolutely agree. The lateral paddling out there with a shallower angle of attack into the water, you can make way with less water. It's going to vary by years. It's a natural river, and I think we can knock around this idea, but it goes back to Becca's comment about the river just downstream from the bridge. Sometimes if it's too shallow, that's how rivers respond. And the issue of going upriver is really depends on a lot of pieces. Part of those being just how motivated a paddler is. If you're the kind of person who wants to stand in the stern of a canoe and pole up, you can go up really thin water and go up some pretty mean stuff. There are not a lot of people who are enthusiastically poling canoes anymore, though I highly encourage folks because it's a terrible amount of fun. Just be prepared to end up in the water. It's going to be variable, and to David Bleese's question about right now, the North Impoundment Zone, it's a pond. You could disconnect the river from that and you can paddle as long as it's not hard water paddling. You don't want to go out on ice. That's just, you don't need the boat for that. Grab skates. It's going to bring back the variability of the seasons is what it would do, and associated challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Final comment or question from Mike Balcom.
Yeah, sorry to jump on the last minute, but just for food for thought, I know people are kind of comparing to the downstream portion and, trying to equate that to what may be coming upstream if the spillway was removed. But that's pretty special downstream. Number one, it's starved of sediment, especially the sand sediment things, and that changes a river, how a river's formed and things like that. And the second, I think, more powerful thing is that this 20 feet apron right after the spillway just kind of evens out the water coming, and the river no longer acts like a normal river. And the sides move as fast as the middle and everything else until there's some breaks and trees that have fallen down river, where then it starts to act like a river again, where it's moves slower on the sides and faster in the middle. Therefore, the middle typically gets cut deeper. So I wouldn't be surprised without the spillway that we would have more navigable in that area, especially on the north side of the island. And then whatever happens, I think these folks have described to us what may kind of happen parameter-wise upstream in the river, but it's just food for thought, and I just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, Jillian, last comment or question before break.
Thanks. No, I just was thinking about what Mike was saying and thinking about the properties that are downstream of the dam. And Mike, I think you shared something about almost like a boat landing type thing that you have at your property. So it just strikes me that people are paddling downstream, right? They're using kayaks or canoes or some watercraft. So it's possible. Is just what I wanted to flag. It's like, I think Mike has said this before, but it would be a river. It wouldn't be a lake.
Thank you. I think we're struggling right now and through this whole process with the fact that this is a river and we can't know everything about it or what it will do, right? It is not a sort of thing you can answer. We're trying to learn what we can and imagine what we can together, and with the support of people who know rivers with different perspectives. So we just have to sit with that and know this is the best we can do. And it's just so helpful to have the information that you shared, Stantec team. Thank you very much for your work. We really wanted to see that. We are going to take just a 5-minute break. We'll start right at 5:30. We have 2 really important things to do before 6:30, which are to talk about financials and then to hear from probably 10 members of the public. We're going to have a longer public comment. So we'll start right at 5:30. Thank you, everyone, so much. Do you want us to share your slides for this next piece, or do you want to do it?
I can do it.
Great. Welcome back, everyone. I know that was very quick. If you're snacking, please carry on. We are going to go to financial impacts now, and I'm going to turn this over to John, who's been working with various people to try to be able to say something clear and organized about a lot of different pieces. Go ahead, John.
Thanks, Ona. We've worked, the town staff in Stantec and GZA to identify some probable costs for either scenario. I'll walk through that. I'm just going to pull up my slides. Just give me one sec. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yep, yes. It looks good.
Awesome, because you were either going to be looking at that or you're going to be looking at a picture from one of my camping trips in the past. So glad you're looking at the right thing. So again, I'll be sharing some probable costs for either scenario. Just to give a little bit of background, the town first presented estimates comparing financial impacts for dam repair and spillway removal in May of 2021. Based on probable cost estimates for traditional dam repair from GZA that was prepared in 2019, a feasibility study of the spillway removal from GZA in 2020. Those have been updated, and we've revised the probable cost estimates for dam repair, spillway removal. We've also done a surface analysis of operations and maintenance costs, looking at a number of year horizon. We looked at 30 years and what some of those costs would be. In addition, as we found out more information around regulations, we've identified the need for a fish ladder construction and maintenance. And then we wrapped those costs into a total cost as opposed to having them in phases. I know we've talked about park improvements, and I know there's probably going to be a desire to request that in the ultimate decision this group makes, that funding is looked at for park improvements and enhancement, but we're not going to dive into the details of those park improvements as part of these cost considerations. Requesting that the select board and town administration work to identify some funds, potentially go to town meeting for park improvements as part of this is certainly something the committee can do, but we're not going to dive into the specifics of those in that analysis. So in the dam repair version, what we're looking at is one-time costs of the repair of the earthen berm, repair of the entrainment wall, and then replacement of a fish ladder. And then we also looked at, from an operations and maintenance costs, the dam maintenance, the annual fish ladder maintenance and oversight, DCR compliance, which is something that we have every 2 years, and then preventative maintenance. We recognized on every 15 years, we rolled them up into a 30-year cost. So the one-time cost for the dam repair is engineering, design work, and permitting for a total of $150,000. Looking at construction, tree removal, stump backfill voids, regrade the embankment, install turf reinforcement, regrade the upstream slope, and provide riprap. There's other stone protection that we could look at, and I know that was something that the committee had talked about. That's possible, but that would be at a higher cost. Decommissioning of the low-level outlet at the right of the abutment, to reconstruct the upstream and downstream spillway training walls, replace the low-level outlet gate, restore and reconstruct the concrete superstructure and outlet opening, and repair cracks in the primary spillway. That construction total is $2,100,000 for a total between engineering and construction costs of $2,250,000. In addition, we have a one-time cost of a prefabricated fish ladder replacement. The current fish ladder that we have, as we talked about at a previous meeting, does not allow the fish that we have within the river to be able to move upstream. So we would need to reconstruct so that the native fish that we have are able to move. The current fish ladder does not allow for that. There would be an engineering cost for that, design and permitting, and then the construction for that. That would be a prefabricated aluminum fish ladder that would be placed in the existing fish ladder location. That area would have to be remodified to accept that fish ladder, and that would be part of the original cost, but this would be the cost for the fish ladder to go in to accept the fish that we have. Some of the operation and maintenance costs for the dam repair that we've identified, the fish ladder monitoring. Once we have this fish ladder in place, one of the things that's really important is to make sure that the fish are able to move through it. So there would be maintenance costs associated with that. We would need to monitor to make sure that the fish are actually moving the way that it's intended. And if there were any issues, we would have to address and fix that. So we're estimating an annual cost of around $10,000. Preventative maintenance, repointing the masonry walls, gate and maintenance. It's recommended that every 15 years we do that. We felt that because it's been a number of years since we've actually done some of that work, the dam's about 90 years old, that there would be a requirement for repointing and masonry work. So the estimate was 15 years for $50,000. We rolled that up to a lump sum of $100,000 for the 30 years. We might need to do all of that work in 1 year over that 30-year period, or we might have to do some piecework over the course of that time. But we're estimating through estimates from GZA that would be the requirement. Fish ladder maintenance and a replacement. The estimated life for that is about 30 years. So we have a prefabricated aluminum ladder that would go in. That would need to be replaced at about 30 years unless we had an issue with it, which would require us to replace it earlier. Biennial DCR compliance every 2 years. As part of having a dam, we're required to do this. So every 2 years, we need to update our emergency action plan for $5,000, and then an inspection every 2 years at $7,000. These aren't adjusted for price increases or inflation, but those costs over a 30-year period would be in the range of $830,000. There's other costs that we didn't include in this. For example, when the trees are removed and the turf is there, there would be some additional maintenance costs from our Parks division, but we felt that these costs were specific to those dam elements, and even though there would be additional costs for that, we didn't include that in this analysis. So for the spillway removal, what's included? We looked at the one-time costs. From an operations and maintenance costs, we did not have any. So walking through the spillway removal, the engineering costs, design and permitting, again for a subtotal of $466,000. Construction, mobilization and demobilization, 160, water sediment management, spillway demo, rock work, vegetated riprap, channel grading, and miscellaneous costs, 165. Final site grading cleanup and demobilization, 90,000, and construction and technical services, 90,000. That brings a total construction of $1,045,000 for $1,511,000. In looking at the probable cost comparison in just the one-time costs, so for dam repair, we are looking at $2,640,000. For the spillway removal option, we're looking at $1,511,000. And when comparing the two, we're over $1 million for the dam repair option. In addition, as I mentioned, there's operation and maintenance costs with having the dam that we would have to account for again over that 30-year span. We're anticipating $830,000 in probable costs. Some other considerations that we have, part of the work that the staff's done is looking at, well, how do we fund some of these elements going forward? Currently in 2019, the spring annual town meeting approved $1,200,000 for the dam repair work to be done. So in either of those scenarios, either removal or repair, we don't have enough funding at this point. So we would likely have to go back to town meeting for additional funding. And if we were to do the spillway removal, we would have to go back to ask them to do that because that's different work than what we had laid out initially. However, there are opportunities for grants, and the town does a great job of identifying grants and getting those grants. Stantec doing the work that they did on the spillway removal feasibility was through a grant that was secured by our staff in town. So we're good at reaching out and trying to find ways to fund things outside of taxpayer dollars. So there are some funding sources that we've identified currently for dam repair. The FEMA Rehabilitation of High Hazard Dam grant program is out there. The Massachusetts Executive Office in Energy and Environmental Affairs Dam and Seawall Repair Program is out there that we can apply for. And the United States Dam of Agricultural Natural Resources Conservation, Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations, they have a program where dam repair could qualify. There's a number more for grants for spillway removal. I'll hit the top couple and then you can look at the rest of them and look at the slides later, but National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, restoring fish passages through barrier removal, FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, Rehabilitation of High Hazard Potential Dam Grant Program, Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, the MVP Program, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness, as well as others that are available that we could look to secure. Just to look at the projected timing, so once a decision is made to move forward and funding is secured, the engineering work for a dam repair would be about 1.5 years, and then construction would take place thereafter. In a spillway removal, the engineering, design, and permitting would take a bit longer, with just over 2 years, and then construction would start thereafter. So in either of these scenarios, we still have some design and engineering and permitting work that would be required to move these forward.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Great. Let's take this down, although probably people might ask to look at particular slides again. Committee. Questions, reflections? Comments? Martin, go ahead.
I just had one technical question on one of the items in, I forget which one it was in, but it was $750,000 for gate, the lower gate repair or something, lower gate reconstruction.
Yeah, Martin. So that was the replace lower level outlet gate, restore, reconstruct the concrete superstructure and outlet openings. Those, and Bill, if you want to jump in at all, feel free. But those have not been addressed, I think, in the 90 years of the dam. So we have a feeling that if those gates are opened, they won't be able to be closed based on just some initial looks at that. So those would have to be reconstructed and reworked so that they would operate appropriately.
So that I'm trying to figure out what that is. That's the gates that let water bypass the spillway to change the level. Yeah.
Correct. So when you're standing on top of the when you're standing on the slab where the old mill levers were, I guess, and I might not be explaining this correctly, so someone help me if I'm way off, but that platform where you're looking back over at the Bacon Free Library, past Grove Park in that area, those gates are underneath that concrete slab that's right there.
Okay. Yeah, I just
the levers are on top.
That's a big item. That's a big cost a lot.
Yep.
Thanks, Martin. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, just thanks, John, for this. I think that's one of the most important pieces of information we need as we're making our decision. I was wondering if you could comment on kind of the permitting for the spill removal. What's kind of your confidence there in that number? I've heard people say that it may be a difficult thing to do, but obviously, getting rid of blocks and rivers are a good thing. So I just wanted to get your comment on that. And also, just kind of in the confidence in getting grants in general, do you see a difference in numbers between the two scenarios? I know there's more opportunities maybe on the spillway removal, but do you have any input on kind of the overall numbers, how it would help the bottom line?
Sure. I'll speak to the first part, and then I'm actually going to let Jillian take a stab at the second part, because she's actually done a lot of the work and research on looking at these grants. In terms of the permitting for the spillway removal, I feel that's a pretty solid number. That is a number that we got from Stantec in terms of their cost work. So with all of the previous projects that they had completed, I feel that that's a solid number in terms of the permitting that would be required and similar types of work that they've done. Jillian, do you mind hopping in on the...
Jillian, sorry.
Yeah, it's a good question, Mike. So an intern of mine helped me research the grants that are out there. And I would say that the scale of the grants that are available for dam removal or spillway removal, as we talk about, are much larger. And there's one right now that was recently, there's two right now that are open. One that NOAA, if you go to their website, it doesn't require any match from the town at all. It could potentially cover the whole project, versus a lot of the dam repair ones, you see lower dollars in terms of just looking at the historical amount, like the dollar amount of grants that are given to communities that are awarded the funds. And you'll also note that a couple of the grants that were listed, opportunities that were listed in the dam repair side, those are also listed in the dam removal side, and there's often more points given if it's a dam removal versus a dam repair. And I think that just, it just goes to point out that the state and federal government are really promoting dam removal versus dam repair, especially groups that are focused on like ecological restoration. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Jillian. Janine.
Janine, you're on mute.
Hi. Okay. I tend to try to be mindful of the fact that repair or removal, these price tags reflect something that would be lasting 100 years, right? And that if you divide the price tag by the taxpayers in Natick, it works out to like 0.00000 cents, a day. It's nothing. And beauty and navigability of the river are worth it to the people of our community. And I wish when these numbers are reflected, they should be broken down more in terms of what the real price is over the long run. That's it for me.
Other committee members, reflections, observations, questions? Dirk, go ahead, and then Mike.
Yeah, I have question marks. I'm not sure the question I want to ask because the question marks I have regard making that area what we want it to be for as a property of and an asset to the town. And the dollars we're looking at are very much a baseline. I mean, you know, they're about doing what we need to do for the dam, one way or another, and not much about making the space what we want of it. My question, I guess, is, well, I've beaten this drum before. I think it's not only a good thing for our community, it's also cost effective for us to be asking that question now, because we've got doing anything in that area, in a wetlands, near a river, and so forth. We've got a big permitting process, a big regulatory, application, consideration, evaluation, permitting process. And doing that once instead of twice, if we can, is definitely an efficiency. So my question is, to what extent can we build into this project some level of making the space what we want of it, above and beyond the baseline of the functional fix to the dam? And how do we do that?
So just my thoughts, and if anyone else wants to jump in on this, but I think the recommendation to the select board could be, we choose removal or repair. In addition, there's a recommendation that we need to do work for park enhancements and improvements. I think one of the challenges of this committee is that the park improvements and the enhancements that would take place down there, there's a lot of time that's going to be invested in diving down that path and a lot of public engagement. And I think we've talked about this in the past, that there would be additional public engagement and additional outreach in terms of the enhancements and improvements that would be made. In addition, in the information that we received through Haverson when they were at the last meeting, in either of those I'm trying to look for the right word, but in either one of those concept developments that they had laid out, it's likely going to be a similar cost in either scenario. So I think what's important for the committee is understanding the choice of removal versus repair, and then the recognition that if the committee wants to make a recommendation, that the recommendation should include there's a need to make enhancements and improvements to the parks as well. But I think we don't have the specifics on numbers, and there's going to be more community engagement that would be required to determine exactly what needs to happen in that park. So it's a little bit of a slippery slope.
It certainly is. I think it's one we ought to attack, if I can just editorialize a bit. In part because I think it's a good thing for the value of the area. But also I think it's cost effective, and I'm here representing a body that's supposed to look after our efficiency with public dollars. It's efficient not to go through permitting processes more times than we have to for this area.
Thank you, Dirk. Mike, and then Chris, and then Becca, and then David, and we are going to go to public comment before long because we think there are many who would like to chime in. But Mike, go ahead.
Thank you. John, what two things, if you could just comment to flesh out some of the line items. The fish ladder that you talked about as being a requirement. Can you talk about that? Like, where does that requirement come from? And, you know, just so people know, it will, and kind of what the percentage of probability that we need to make a fish ladder or rebuild it. And then the other thing was, can you explain kind of the increases of the dollar value of dam repair from the 2019 GZA report? I know there are differences, but maybe you could spell that out for us. Thanks.
Sure. So I'll take the first half, and then Bill, if you can help me with that second piece in terms of the changes, because I know that was before I had gotten here. I've looked a little bit into it, but I might need your help a little on that one, Bill. In terms of the requirement for the fish ladder, so as part of the permitting process, we have to go through the local conservation commission as well as, and Claire, I'm going to get this wrong, so feel free to jump in when I do it, but the Corps of, fill in the blank for me.
Army Corps of Engineers. Sorry.
Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you. Sorry. I knew I was like 50% there. So as part of that process in permitting of this work, we would have to do that. This is one of those situations where we recognize we're out of compliance with the current fish ladder that we have. And it's likely that one or both of those boards would require us to, or through the review process, it would be a requirement from one, if not both. In addition, what we don't want to do is we don't want to do it now and have to do it later. So because we've recognized that it's going to be a requirement to upgrade the fish ladder because it's not accommodating the fish that are native to the area, it's something that we are likely going to have to do within the process. Claire?
Yeah, just to jump in on a little more, Mike, when town staff met with a NOAA representative just to get a little bit more information about fish ladders and what this process could look like should the dam be repaired, he did note that, there is and I'll get the citation wrong, it's Part 1, Title 24, or I'm sorry, Title 29, Section 19 of the MGL that regulates fish ladders in areas with cold water fisheries. And so we are technically out of compliance with that regulation and that law currently. And in meeting with the NOAA representatives, we may have sort of unknowingly brought more eyes down upon us. So it's very likely that fish ladder upgrade would be required during the Army Corps of Engineering permitting process, and that the commission would support that during their local wetlands permitting process. And John is correct, the current fish ladder is not sort of doing what it would be, but it is important to note that no fish ladder is perfect, even a brand new one, so that even in the future, should we choose dam removal and install this brand new fish ladder, we still may not see the kind of migratory numbers that we would potentially see if the dam would be removed.
Where you mean in dam repair, if we installed it. Right.
Thank you.
I know. And then there was a second part of Mike's question, which was about the cost, the incremental cost increase from 2019, John or Bill?
I can comment to that. I mean, what we had from GZA was their estimate, opinion of probable cost based on the work that was being permitted in 2019. I mean, obviously, as we've gone back to ask them to revisit those numbers, we asked them, are these still good as we're carrying them forward? The cost of a lot of materials have gone, through the roof. So they have gone up. That is based on, the current prices now, the inflation. So fundamentally, most of that has been just inflationary factors on construction costs and materials costs, particularly for concrete. And some of the other things for the gate repair, those have gone up almost doubled for the work that needs to be done. As John had mentioned, we had an inspection report before regarding those gates, and it's not the gates themselves, it's the framework that holds the gates to the actual concrete structure that has been impinged, and that is what I would need to replace that entire structure, the sliding gate valves themselves, as well as the mechanism up above. And they are very specialized items, and they have to be ordered well in advance. That was a big part of the costs moving forward.
Thank you. Committee members, we're at the time when we want to be shifting to public comment, but I want to give a few of you a chance to weigh in who have your hands up. So just ask everybody to be as concise as you are able. So in the queue are Chris, Becca, David Lotting, and Martin. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive to the pricing of these things, and I know that a lot of effort goes into them, and you can get them as close as you can possibly get. But putting on my engineering consultant hat, I know that when you're dealing with an unknown, the dam repair is the biggest unknown of these two options, and I can picture about 5 of those things, those items that would have some serious creep based on, needing borings, figuring out fail points, figuring out the geology of the area. Do you have an idea of what kind of zone of uncertainty you have for the dam repair? Because I know that when you're dealing with the dam removal, that's a real static cost. You can guarantee you can add a little bit of inflation and get pretty close ballpark on that. So as far as the dam repair, do you think there was enough due diligence to know where each one of those things might just, like a range of cost increase? Because I think that way we let the public know that there was a due diligence done for the price. So it's not lower than it.
I would defer, I think, to GZA on that as far as asking for a range right now. The numbers that we have, I would consider them to be planning numbers. And you saw just in the 2 years from 2019, 2022, that the price almost doubled. So you're saying, what is the range? In this particular case, just unfortunately because of this particular climate, I don't have a really good confidence in that as far as a range. I would say your range, I could be varying as much as 30% per annum. So we would continue to update these as we're going through this process right now. And until we actually have the project permitted, an estimate, as you had mentioned, there can be unknowns as we are doing the work, as we're performing the work that's required information to the entities who are permitting this. We can be finding out more information that are going to, as a general rule, my project costs don't go down. So as we're going through the permitting and getting the really hard data prior to actually putting shovels in the ground, right now I would say my confidence in these prices are, again, somewhere between 30 to 50% per annum.
Thanks, Bill. Let's go. I want to note the question from David in the chat about whether we could put the cost estimates in perspective compared with the typical annual budget for capital projects. John, if you have that number offhand-ish at some point, that would be helpful. But let's go to Becca.
So I think one piece, again, and this goes back to the conversation from earlier today in terms of this beauty piece and this navigability piece, and I can't say that word anymore today, but I think that, in both situations, there need to be park improvements. And from a fiscal responsibility and what the town needs from us, I think it's much easier to put that ask to park improvements when we're spending $1 million less on the actual project. I think, again, this piece too, looking at the grantee list, which I think is significant and stands out to me. I've worked with a lot of those organizations that are the grantee organizations, and it's notable to me that there is more funding and more money for the removal option, based on that research. And I think that's significant. So that's not a question. Sorry.
Comments are perfect. Thank you. David Lotting, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to speak briefly to Janine's point. So the capital cost of the repair and the fish lab is about 2.6 million. Sometime early in our discussions, I remember hearing an estimate that the spillway itself would be good for, the number I remember was something like 70 years. If that were really true, then that works out to be about $37,000 a year in capital costs. The maintenance for 30 years, that's $27,000. So, you know, you break it up and it's a little bit easier to look at all that. That's it.
Thank you, David. Martin, go ahead.
Yeah, forgive me if we talked about this a few months ago, but my memory is not the greatest. I didn't notice in the budget anything for invasive species. So particularly when we're going to talk about removing the dam and opening up a lot new area to wetlands, is there a need to have some contingency for monitoring and remediation for invasive species?
Thank you for your question. Anybody want to pick that one up?
I can jump in on that. Martin, that is something that we do need to factor in that is missing from that table currently. I think it's important to note and sort of go back to some of our earlier conversations that it's likely that any town funding for invasive species would be for use on the town property that abuts the river, sort of in that spillway section. It is still definitely in our minds about the private properties that may face similar issues and trying to find sources of funding for them that they can either apply to as private homeowners or potentially creating some sort of town-funded grant that homeowners can apply to for funding. So I'll work with John we have some good estimates of that, what that type of work can cost. I'll work with John to get that table updated.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to the staff who worked on putting this all together. Thanks, committee members, for all of your questions and comments and reflections. We're going to go to public comment. We have 7 people who have raised their hand. If you'd like to make public comment, please raise your virtual hand. Or if you're just on the phone and you want to make public comment, you can dial *6. Because of the number of people in the queue, we will give you
just really quickly, *9 to raise the hand.
*9. Funny, I thought *9, but I said *6. No good. We'll give you each 2 minutes and ask you to really focus on your most essential messages for the committee. And we will start with Edward Jordan, and next up will be Robert Kearns. Edward, welcome, and go ahead. Edward, we can hear you, I think, if you try to speak. Unless you're double muted somehow.
Can you hear me?
Let's go. Oh, there you are.
Good. Ed Jordan, 47 Yorkshire Road, Dover. The impact of the removal of the spillway is more significant now than in prior discussions. Prior, it was stated the impact zone was up to the pedestrian bridge. Now it's up to the Farm Street Bridge in Sherburne. Living in the southern impact zone, I can attest that kayakers, canoers, motorboat operators enjoy the river all year, and it's enjoyed by many. The removal of the spillway, recreation will be affected. The pond is eliminated, it's gone. The river becomes less significant. Depth, width, speed. Think about the river below the spillway. That's what you'll have above. I don't know anybody that enjoys boating in less than 6 inches of water. That's what's going to happen upstream. Moreover, bridge scour, water tables, residents in multiple towns upstream and downstream will be affected. Lastly, these river effects that were discussed today are from people who are in the business of dam removal. Like all forecasts, we know they're just estimates, they're not actuals. Suspect the impact upstream and downstream will be more significant than what was discussed today. As for costs discussed, the costs are insignificant over multiple years. What wasn't considered was the financial liability associated with the removal of the spillway. My recommendation, don't make the South Natick Falls a silent stream. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Kearns and then Brad Peterson. So Robert Kearns, you should be able to speak.
Hello, thank you so much, committee members. Robert Kearns here with the Charles River Watershed Association. We've sent in some comments about this project in support of dam removal, and we just like to say we still support dam removal and restoration of the Charles River. And we just want to highlight that we want to honor and respect the wishes of the Natick, Nipmuc, and other indigenous people who have said that they never wanted dams on the river, including this dam, and they would like the dam to be removed. So we would like to support that as well for the health of the river. And so thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Brad Peterson, you're up, and then Bayrosh.
Hey there.
Brad.
Hi, you able to hear me?
We are.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. I found the Stantec presentation quite helpful. After listening to the presentation, I think it's apparent that there's no, magic, unique geological feature beneath the dam. And if we remove it, we're not going to have some rock waterfall. It will not look like, the rapids on the Colorado River. It'll look like every other part of the Charles River that's now downstream of the dam. And that's mostly a shallow, slow-moving, muddy creek. Especially this time of year when the water levels are even lower. To be frank, it doesn't look very attractive, at least not to me. We know what the spillway looks like today. We know what the pond behind it looks like today. Many in our neighborhood would say it looks quite beautiful, majestic even. And in my opinion, I think it would really be a shame to take it down. And I have to say, as a previous speaker mentioned, many of the experts you've invited to speak in front of the committee have dam removal as part of their professional sort of remit. Like the presentation we saw today from Stantec, they talked about being specifically tuned in to dam removal. They basically just want to take down dams wherever they are and however beautiful they might actually be. And I guess that's understandable in the context of their organizational mission. I just think it's important to remind ourselves that these groups don't explicitly weigh all the intangible stuff, like the beauty of the site or the joy that the spillway brings to all of us who live here and might happen to travel by the dam every day. So those things are not explicitly part of their decision-making process. People come to our spillway because it's beautiful, right? They come and they take their wedding photos and they have for a long time. And that's not something these groups consider when they tell us that, water oxygen content might be slightly improved or something like that. It's not part of their scientific calculation. So to that end, I really hope that the board doesn't forget these real, very real, intangible things that are not expressly qualified or quantified on a slide.
Thank you, Brad. You're at time. But
thank you for your time.
One more sentence. Okay, thank you.
Oh, actually, no, just 10 more seconds, if I can.
Do it.
The other is I'm just sort of disappointed that the historic commission or the historical district wasn't invited to speak to the committee, because the dam is part of the historic district. And I think they would have provided a real contrast to some of the other people that came in and presented in front of you. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brad. Dave Roche. Allow you to speak.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you to the committee. I completely understand what a tough job you've been doing and have ahead of you. I agree with Brad, the gentleman before me, and the first gentleman. I think that to not weigh in on the beauty, and the dam has been a destination for years and years for the town, and it gives it character, and to take that, to really change that. I am deeply concerned by integrating in climate change with something like this. I think it calls Santec, so they did not speak to that at all. I also, clearly they are in the business of taking out dams. And so I live on the river, and I live where the river splits from 16 on South Street. And it is a huge part of life here. There's now a bald eagle that goes upriver fishing. I'm deeply concerned that it will become a brook and with muddy banks. The wildlife here is growing, as opposed to the concern being that it will not continue to grow the way it is. And I think the point on invasives is very important, because I have land here on the river, and the invasives are a full-time job. So I just want to.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Steve Dannon, and then Jeffrey North after Steve.
There we go. Thank you. I'm going to pick up on where Brad left off. My name is Steve Dannon. I'm a resident of 94 Elliott Street with my wife and family. My house was constructed in 1884 by Curtis Broad. It was known as his family house, where he established the Old Town Canoe and Livery Company. And there was actually a boathouse in front of my house on the Charles, and there was since 1884. That meant people could come out to the South Natick area, use their canoes all year round, especially in the summer, because of the existence of the dam. It would be a travesty not to be able to navigate this river, as has been done for many years. My home is in the Historic District Commission. I was not bothered by that when I purchased my home 10 years ago. I enjoyed it. I felt safe because of it. Changes could not be made to my neighborhood because of that. If changes are to be made to my home, it needs to be approved by the Historic District Commission, and all areas visible by both Route 16 and the Charles River as a public way have to meet their requirements. It's a two-way street, it's a two-way river, and I hope it stays that way so the beauty can be kept as it always has been. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Jeffrey North, and then Susan Blees.
Opportunity to attend and comment on these proceedings. Can you hear me?
We can.
Jeffrey North. I'm the conservation chair at the Greater Boston chapter of Trout Unlimited, or GBTU. Trout Unlimited National was established in 1959, and we've got over 150,000 members and about 400 chapters in about 42 states. And our mission is to bring together diverse interests to care for and recover rivers and streams so that the next generation can experience the joy of wild and native trout and salmon. And we do that by engaging with communities across the country in the work of repairing and renewing rivers and streams. So as you can imagine, nationally at TU, we've seen improvements in river ecology and flood prevention and community safety resulting from a great many dam removal projects that we've been engaged in. And locally, and most recently, Greater Boston TU has worked on the removal of the Mill Pond Dam on Trephole Brook in Norwood, tributary to the Neponset River. The Boston the TU chapter has got just about 1,000 members, many of whom live in this watershed. And we want to say that we support the removal of this dam spillway and the restoration of the Charles River in the region. And we would expect that this project would produce multiple benefits, ecological and recreational. We can't speak to public safety, not engineers, but removal of the dam should improve water quality in the Charles River. And freeing the Charles at the South Natick Dam will lead to lower temperatures and higher dissolved oxygen levels as the water would flow more freely. And colder water with higher levels of oxygen is better for wild trout. Also, free movement of sediment in restored river would improve the riverine bottom habitat for multiple fish species. So removal of this dam would connect two cold water streams and really enhance the flow of the Charles River.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to be so quick. Let's go to Susan and then Rick.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I wanted to thank the committee, Gordon and John and Michael. I also wanted to agree with Brad and Steve that there are intangible things that we could lose, that I am in a historic district, that I actually would like anybody who would like to come and sit on my deck. I'm 70 Elliott Street and look out at the beauty that I see now. So I agree with them. But I also say that there are the intangibles that, such as reflections, traffic, parking, various things that are intangibles when we look at that river. And just to say, people will not necessarily want to come and have wedding photographs looking out at parking, at big boardwalks. I agree the historic, whose history, how many generations back, history of this river, keeping the place historic, keeping the conservation, sending boardwalks and kayak racks is not part of this natural beauty. I thought we were trying to preserve the beauty, and the best way to preserve the visuals for the public as well as for somebody like me as an abutter, the beauty will be really compromised in many, many ways. Mainly traffic. If you'd like to sit at rush hour morning or evening, you will see without the trees. The renditions are wonderful for the seaport, but they are not a representation of this area of South Natick. The representations show green grass and deciduous trees. This is not realistic to mowing lawns and watering it in droughts, maintaining boardwalks. It really is a fantasy to think that we're going to maintain, as they said, the beauty as it's been for many years. I bought this house to retire in and look at this beauty, and the beauty will be destroyed with the maintenance of artificial things to try and keep this river and this spillway in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Rick, and then someone who's in with a phone number that ends 0430. So Rick, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I believe I'm unmuted. And pardon me if the answer to this question has been covered in previous sessions that I haven't seen. I'm just curious whether Stantec could comment upon the number of spillway projects that have not been done, where communities have chosen not to do them, and done other work, restoration work instead, and what might have caused that, in brief. And also whether there are, I know it's not up to code and there may be implications and liabilities for this, but I'm curious what the downside of doing nothing is to the spillway, and sort of a gradual collapse, whether that could be calamitous or probably a stupid question to be answered quickly. That's all. Thank you.
Rick. Let's go to someone who's in on the phone. You should be able to unmute with *6 now.
Hi, my name's Valerie Bosson. I live at 196 Elliott Street. I think I am in what they said was the south impoundment area, but I'm right next to the north impoundment area, and I'm actually very troubled at the idea of a 3 to 5 foot drop in the river. We already have problems with invasive species. We have lots of wildlife, including herons, and I mean, beautiful, beautiful stuff out there. And I would favor dam repair, big time, over spillway. It's not a pond, river, and the notion of decreasing the depth of the river and widening the amount of mud flats and mosquitoes and everything else I'm not in favor of. And by the way, why don't we ever get notice on these meetings? I heard about it from a neighbor, what it's worth. Thank you.
We're glad you're here. Sheldon, final public comment. Oh, and then Candy. I know, Candy, you had your hand up before. So we'll go Sheldon and then Candy for final public comment.
So my concern, can you hear me?
We can.
Hello? Okay, great. So my concern is that the northern impoundment section borders a very popular recreational site that abuts the borders of the spillway, and that the proposed removal of the dam will increase the mosquito population. And I feel like no one addressed the recreational features that the park has to offer. And if the spillway is removed, will it still be an attractive spot for people to go to relax by?
Thank you. Candy and then Bev, I see your hand. So Candy, if you still want to speak, you have the floor.
So just a quick question in listening today only. I mean, I've listened to all of them, but I hear this dilemma between the people who are kayaking and the beauty of the river. And the people that are kayaking are primarily people that live locally, whereas the river and the spillway are people are coming from all over for various reasons. It could be nothing but looking for calm, getting through the COVID, many other what might be insignificant, but it reaches a far greater group of people than us locally. I live right near the dam. I love it. And I can't see any reason why we really need to change it. We all can manage what we have. Why alter? Do the minimal. Thank you.
Bev, final public comment. Bev Rich, go ahead.
Hi. I haven't heard anyone address the ongoing liability of the town if the repair is done, and the chances that that liability will take effect given the unknowns of climate change. In addition to that, I just wanted to put in a perspective as an abutter, which is probably going to be different from my husband, which is Martin Kessel. But I actually, although I'm a abutter and I walk to the dam a lot and I enjoy it, I love it, I do feel like we are responsible for the environment, and anything we can do to preserve it and protect it is really important. And in addition, it sounded like from the beginning that there may be some significant liability from the town if the dam is repaired and preserved. So I wanted to inquire into that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for all of that. Janine, I'm going to let you share some thoughts. I think you're responding to a historic commission kind of question. And then we're going to talk next steps, what to expect at the next meeting, and then we'll let committee members share their final thoughts. So Janine, and then we'll go to next steps.
Okay, I want to comment to Brad Peterson and those questioning our role in this. The historic district includes both parks on opposite sides of the spillway, including the earthen dam, but it does not include the spillway, incredibly. And our mission is to keep design changes and historic features appropriate to the district. So in terms of Sue Bleese's comment about boardwalks and so on, any kind of change such as that would have to be reviewed by the board, and our mission would be to make them appropriate to what exists, the cultural history of the area.
Thank you.
And then also I want to comment that history preceded the colonials who came here, and that I feel a responsibility to at least remain open to preserving the natural beauty of the river and the fish that inhabit it. Thank you.
All right. I want to just say a couple of things about what's happening next for this committee, and then we'll do final thoughts. So we have met tonight, and we have 2 more meetings scheduled, July 19th and July 26th, which are for deliberation and decision making. We are hoping, committee members, that you will go to your constituents, neighbors, friends, the committees, the boards you belong to, and talk with them in these next few weeks to supplement the members of the public who have been contributing in our meetings and in writing and via our public engagement periods, to just talk and explore and hear what's kind of going on. And then when you come on July 19th, we're going to go back to early conversations we had about values and priorities and what was important to us, and talk through those related to the choices. And we'll review again our decision-making protocol. For anyone who wasn't on the last meeting, just a reminder that the committee determined that to reach agreement, it would it would need to get 75% of voting members to agree. So you are looking for overwhelming agreement to send a really clear signal to the town, to the select board, about what you'd like to happen. And people will have the opportunity to abstain. And we have the opportunity to write a creative summary about what matters to you and why you're making the choice that you're making. And we can do that together. And so that is what we're coming to in the next month or so. Tonight was our last sort of big information in session. So you have, I think it's been 11 meetings. So if you need to go back and sort of think about any of that in the next 3 weeks, that would be helpful. Skim meeting summaries, kind of remember the key things that you take from everything we've talked about together and with various members of the public and groups that have weighed in and experts. This is the time to do that thinking before we talk together on July 19th. I think otherwise we will post the meeting recording, we'll draft a meeting summary. We may try to pick up a few threads that got raised today and get some responses to a few things. But we're not preparing any big presentations for next time. Next time we're all talking together. Planning team, am I forgetting any important next steps we need to name before we do final comments? Yeah. All right, let's, I'm gonna just call on all the committee members. We're gonna go probably 10 minutes over. Thank you for your patience. And invite final thoughts as we reach this transition moment. And I'll go, I'd like to go to Seth and then Kristen. If that's possible, Seth?
Sure. How's that? Am I on screen? I think I am. So first question is, I came in a little bit late today, and the renderings of what the dam would look like during repair and what the tree configuration would look like is still unclear to me, and I would really like to know that, because I will be going back to the Parks and Rec Commission and discussing what we've discussed over the past meetings and ask them for a vote on what they think is the appropriate thing to do with my with information that I give them from the meeting. So that rendering of best case scenario of what it would look like with a repair is a little bit is important to me. Second thing is it was very interesting today to understand the variability of what the river would look like upstream. Also, I am one who think the financial concerns are always a concern. The town is always looking to leverage opportunities to save money when it's the right place. And the sum of money difference is significant. And I don't think anybody can look at it differently, especially with what the town is looking to do in the next few years. We're looking at an override. So to even think that a savings is insignificant, it really isn't. The other thing that we've listened to here during all these meetings are many experts. And I haven't heard one expert say that, yes, absolutely keep the dam, repair it will be the best thing for the river, for the town, for the maintenance. I'm not against repair, but I really haven't heard anybody say that repair is the way to go. Once again, concerned about the recreation opportunities if we did remove the dam because of the water levels. So that's where I am today. Thank you for everyone for participating and appreciate the process.
Lisa. Go to Kristen and then Maggie.
Yeah, it's hard to answer this question. It's been a journey, everyone, for sure. And I feel like with each meeting, there's new information to grapple with. And it's to the point that I'm like, how many iterations and how many different times have we heard it, that it can be a little bit overwhelming. I really appreciate the public comment and hearing from the residents. But yeah, at this point, I'm just, I think, struggling a little bit with all of the considerations, just, folks that have followed the presentation that I gave and the reason that I'm here. It's just without a doubt, I think that's just a struggle too, is the cultural difference. All of the questions and considerations are important. And at the same time, history and the survival of my people and the resilience of the landscape has told us time and time again that we're caretakers of it, and that our livelihoods are really centered on the health and abundance of the landscape. And I just feel like that's pretty much the evidence that I need. And really appreciate the point raised that, we've heard time and time again from experts that none have said absolutely keep this dam. And the ecological benefits of removal seem pretty clear. And I trust in the voice of my ancestors as well. So that's where I am. And yeah, a little bit of frustration that we're having to continue, I guess, entertaining concern around, just things my ancestors would not have thought is our first priority. And really the priority is the health and wellness of the ecosystem. So thanks.
Maggie and then John.
Thank you, Kristen, for sharing that. I just wanted to share. I'm looking forward to kind of the more deliberative and back and forth and engagement in this committee that's coming up in July. It has been many, many presentations, and I'm excited for more kind of discussion with you all.
Thank you, John, and then Bill.
I think the conversations have been great, and there's certainly been a lot of information that's been gathered throughout this process, going back over a year ago, even further in terms of understanding what should happen here. So I think we have a lot of information. I think it's never going to be a perfect analysis of information that we have, but this is probably one of the most robust processes I've been through in trying to get an understanding of a very difficult decision that is ahead of all of us. But I think one of the things that's important to consider is that in decisions, there's how people experience things now and how they can experience them in the future. And I don't think that whatever decision this committee makes is going to change how people interacted with this in the past, nor is it going to change how people will be able to create memories in the future with whatever decisions made. So those are my thoughts right now.
Bill and then Chris.
Thank you. I just want to take a second to acknowledge everybody who's been on this committee. We have never had to look for a quorum. I really, really appreciate your time. The fact that people say they're struggling with this, I really, really appreciate that. And I completely empathize with you. That you are struggling with it means that you are listening to everything that's coming up. And I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to the deliberation in July.
So Chris and then David Lotting.
I'd like to springboard off of what Bill said. I think that I came in with a preconceived notion. I've struggled with this, and I'm happy to hear the public, and I think that everybody has a voice. And we're a varied multicultural society, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that and move forward with eyes wide open and everybody's voice heard. That being said, I think that we need to take our community equity into account and understand that this impacts a small group of people and it impacts a large group of people, and where you fall in that is geographic in some ways. But I think we need to weigh all those people, and so that's where the struggle of the decision is for me. And I'm glad to be a part of it, and I'm fairly new, so I appreciate all of you that have been given so much of your time to it. Thank you.
Thank you. David Lotting and then Terry.
Yeah, okay. So I find myself looking at the whole Charles River Dam area through the prism of it being a primary asset of the town. And I guess that's my primary view, and look forward to the deliberations.
Thank you. Terry and then Claire.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge the kind of wide range of public opinion that we've gotten, public comments on this. I am occasionally surprised, as I was today, that there were some points being raised, like we should just leave everything be. Things that obviously we've worked through understanding and discussing at length why that isn't possible, why that is not one of the options. It's what makes our challenge. If all we had to do is like leave it be, we wouldn't be in the middle of this sort of a process. And I think that's what makes this discussion particularly meaningful, because there are many people make very, very clear and cogent arguments on one side or the other. And I think it's a matter of trying to take the long view and also trying to understand that however much we plan and anticipate what this can or could be, there will be something that will come along and surprise us for good, and some things that will surprise us unhappily. And I think we have to gear up for that. And at the risk of putting in like my public service announcement, when we talk about the importance of the landscaping and how we finish the project beyond the boundaries of the actual dealing with the dam and the spillway, but how we treat and address the landscape around it, it reminds me of why there's been increasing conversation about the Community Preservation Act, because I recognize where the finances of the town are, and I'll leave it at that rather than going into my pitch. So, thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Claire and then Becca.
I want to echo some of the sentiments that have already been said to thank everyone who's here for their time. You know, for town staff, a lot of us are used to sort of long night meetings like this, but I know for general members of the public, it can be a real challenge to deal with such a long period of time sitting on Zoom, staring at small boxes. So we really do appreciate everybody's time. I do want to remind some members of the public that GZA, the consultant that reported a number of the earlier meetings, is actually a specialist in dam removal. What they do is remove dams in comparison to Stantec's repairing of dams, or I'm sorry, oh no, I'm getting this mixed up again. GZA is a dam repair specialist versus Stantec, which is more of a removal specialist. So just to remind folks that, you know, we have heard a lot through this process. So I do encourage people to go back and read meeting summaries to get a refresh as we head into this debate period. I'm really looking forward to sort of getting into the nitty gritty and getting back and forth with the committee, because I think that's where the true public process lies, is in public debate and public democracy. So I'm just really looking forward to the July meetings and to getting a recommendation pulled together.
Fair. Becca and then Martin.
I think for me, the word that keeps coming up in my head today is history. And I think one of the things that, you know, I've seen people talk about is sort of the history of the dam. And, you know, Kristen, I feel for your perspective in that history piece going so much, I'm sorry, Kristen, so much further back in that respect and that need to acknowledge that when we talk about historical zones. So I think there's this piece too about being on the right side of history and moving forward in progress and what that looks like. So that's where my head is in the history space.
Martin and then Dirk.
Somebody reminded me that we've been sitting here for nearly 3 hours and I'm still on the edge of my chairs. And this is meeting 11. And I think this would put this on Netflix. It could be a real hit. But I'm still waiting to see how it comes out. So I'm going to say, and it seems like you hear some really good stuff on one side, and now we're hearing some really good stuff on the other side. And I guess I could just thank everybody for their passion and their information and their work and providing us with all this information. And it's going to be, as people said, very tough to figure it all out.
Martin, Dirk, and then Janine.
I want to thank all of my fellow members of the committee for your participation over this whole process. I want to thank the members of the public for coming out to speak and participate. I also want to expand on something that Claire started, because some members of the public, I think probably without malice, with perfectly good intentions, mischaracterized or ignored some parts of the process that we've been through, which has been an extensive process. And it's not just that we have indeed heard from experts who, if they were to be characterized as possibly having an institutional bias, would be an institutional bias toward dam repair, as well as the one today that has possible institutional bias toward dam removal. But also we have heard extensively about liability. And some comments may have tended to about history from various angles in the area. I think this has been a very comprehensive and well-designed process. And I think it's important for us to have that on the record of this meeting's transcript. Beyond that, I look forward to our deliberations. I think I tipped my hand earlier. I'm particularly interested in what somebody outlined about a recommendation that includes some recommendation above and beyond the technical solution to the central issue here of the river and the dam or no dam, part of the spillway or no spillway, technically. I would like to see us make some kind of recommendation that involves doing what it takes to make this the place we all want, and we want people to visit, to travel on foot, by river, by baby stroller, by wheelchair, whatever it may be, and some level of recreation, passive and or active. And I think dialing through that and making some level of recommendation without a lot of equivocation to the Board of Selectmen will be an important, I think, function for this committee in advocating the right thing for what is one of the marquee assets of our town.
Thank you. Janine and then David, please.
I'd like to thank the board and also the moderators who've done such a wonderful job. And I came into this with a clear view. I've enjoyed thinking like a microorganism and as a fish and as a human being, and more spiritually the whole cosmos. The costs, the method of construction, it's been wonderful to be part of such a comprehensive analysis. And I look forward to gathering with the deep enders and reviewing with our downstream posse what their views are, and we'll be back in July to deliberate. Thank you.
David, please, and then Jillian.
Yes, I'm still struggling a lot with it. I guess I agree the park landscaping is paramount, but going back to the last meeting that I missed, I felt the renditions missed the mark completely. I'd rather see something that's more subtle, more natural, and not make such a big production out of what is really quite a small park. Yeah, that's kind of where I stand now.
Thank you. Jillian and then Mike.
I just want to echo the gratitude that everyone has shared for the committee's work. It's been over a year, and I think I said in our first meeting that I felt like this was like the superstar, like the all-star team of all of the committees in town, and I still feel that way. And I'm just really grateful that you've all like stuck with us for the most part on this committee. And reflecting on this past year, I do feel like it's been a real journey. And I wish there was a way for our committee to like transfer all of the knowledge that we've gained in this process to every member of the public. And I know that that's not possible, but I feel hopeful that by having so many boards and committees represented here and different perspectives, that the community will trust the recommendation that this committee provides. And I've been so impressed with the community engagement that we've done on this. It's been more in depth and inclusive. We've had more responses to surveys than even like our town master planning process. And I just think that speaks to how important this is to Natick. And I think that's why all of you are here, is because this is an important place for you. And I look forward to concluding our process and making a recommendation. So thank you.
Jillian, Mike, final comment.
Yeah, I'll just pile on to the thank you to all the committee and town staff members. It's been an eye-opening process, and I've been impressed over this year and a half of just regular citizens' commitment to something like this. So that's a great thing. And just looking at this, I think I see value in river restoration as a general topic. And I think if this was an industrial dam, it would be a no-brainer for us, but it's not. It's a beautiful piece of history that was created with the number one goal to beautify the park. And I think it accomplished that. The other goals were to create a swimming hole, which didn't work out so well, but it also created work during the Depression. But, it's important to remember that, you've got to look at this as a completely successful park that was built in 1930s. The town voted 800-0 to make it happen, and which is impressive when we're looking for, 75% in our decision. And I think it's important to note, I noticed especially a lot of the public comment, there's kind of a binary or doomsday view of things, whether we do one thing or the other. And, someone who lives downstream and has, for the past 20 plus years, spent daily time on the river, it is not a muddy creek, slow moving muddy creek. It is vital river that's 30 to 40 feet wide. My 10-year-old neighbor just caught and released 10 fish yesterday afternoon. At a historically low level, it's still very vital. So, this river, whatever it turns out to be, whether we restore it, it's a vital river. And I don't think people should look at it like, boy, if we remove the spillway, the bald eagle's going to disappear and herons are going to go away. The heron fishes outside every morning in my house, right on the river. So it's a great wildlife. I'm fairly confident that it will even be better with active water moving with higher oxygen rates and things like that. So I understand the importance of keeping this a beautiful place, and we have people on the committee that have a professional career of beautifying places. We have people on the committee that are historical experts. We've had historical, we've had meetings based around the beauty and the history. So this is all something we're considered, and I hope the public recognizes that these things are being looked at and being considered. And to Dirk's point, it would be a no-brainer, but I think, if we were to go to the place of removing the spillway, I think it's the onus is upon us that we replace it with something that is equally compelling and good for the public consumption that's there now. So, I know John had mentioned maybe one avenue doing that, and so I look forward to that discussion.
Thank you. Hard to talk after all that powerful everything. Committee members, if you cannot attend either of the two sessions in July, please let us know at your earliest convenience so we can figure out how we're going to handle that. And also, as you ruminate and reflect and look back on what has been done, what we've heard, do remember that the reason this is a stakeholder committee is because you accumulated knowledge and could collectively get somewhere that somebody who attends one time or reads a couple of documents could not get. Like, that's why we did this process this way. We trust your knowledge and your wisdom and kind of ability to knit all of this together. So listen really well, but hold on to what you know also and what you've learned. We are really, Maggie and I are excited about the deliberation. Also, call us if you have any questions beforehand. We'll make sure everything's really clear and set up. We'll let you know what to expect. But anytime, reach out. Thank you, everyone, for staying late. Hope you have a wonderful evening. We will see you soon.